Welcome, everyone, to the Firing the Man podcast. On today's episode, we are joined by Gary Huang. Gary is the founder of 80/20 Sourcing and the Seven Figure Seller Summit. He has helped thousands of e commerce entrepreneurs save time and money while sourcing products from China and scaling their businesses. Gary has been selling online on Amazon, eBay, Shopify, as well as his own websites for the past 10 years. Gary owns a number of private label brands. This is an episode you will not want to miss. Welcome to the show, Gary.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, David and Ken.
Absolutely. So, first things first, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Absolutely. Well, I'm not going to give you my life story. I can put it into just a few chapters. So, I'm originally from LA, born and raised, went to school there at USC. I guess the first chapter of my professional life was when, in early 2000s, I worked as a contractor at Google and in Mountain View. And this was pre-IPO. I believe it was 04. I'm kind of dating myself. And I worked in their online Google AdWords department, purely in editorial. I was a contractor. I was not a full-time employee. And basically my job was to sit down and review those little 3 lines on Google ads all day long. So I noticed some interesting things. There were a lot of companies advertising for like supplements, like Tahitian nani juice. Online poker was big back then when it was still legal, and probably more porn stuff than you would want to see in a lifetime. Just the nature of the internet. But long story short, I did not get the job at Google. I probably would be a millionaire, at least with stock options. I probably wouldn't be talking to you guys now if I did get the job. But I was let go, and I took away from that experience that, hey, maybe there's something here in terms of e-commerce if all these companies are advertising, pouring all this money into Google ads. So it was about '05. I moved back down with my mom, went back home, and I started selling on eBay. So that was the first chapter of my e-commerce journey. Feel free to interrupt if anything resonates with you guys. So back then, my mom is a retired fashion designer in Los Angeles, and she had a lot of contacts within the fashion industry. And one of them was an importer from China that imported women's shoes. So I thought, maybe there's something here. And I thought, why not just take some pictures with my old school camera? I had like a digital Canon camera back in '05. And I just listed them and I just put them up on eBay. I bought like this book, eBay for Dummies. And I just put it up, and lo and behold, they started selling. And then I'm like, hey, there's something here. And I started going to like, Craigslist, estate sales. We go to like Beverly Hills and all the rich neighborhoods to get like, the good stuff that people didn't want. And I did a ton of like photography, like shoes, women's clothes, jackets, the whole gamut. And basically that's like the second chapter. So that's how I got started in ecom. Just doing pick and pack myself before Amazon FBA. I probably shipped thousands of packages, drove to the USPS post office, dropped them off at the loading dock. I thought I was the man. I had my own little e-commerce business. So that was chapter 2. Chapter 3 was I made a pivot. I decided to move to Asia, to China. It was 2008. Beijing Olympics was a big deal at that time. And I was listening to NPR, and I'm like, I really want to make a move. And I actually majored in Chinese in college, and I also did study abroad. And Shanghai was like New York City on steroids. It was the place to be, super cosmopolitan, a lot of cool people, a lot of opportunities. So I made a pivot. 2008, no job in hand. I had one really good buddy. He let me crash on his couch for the first month, and I ended up finding a job opportunity in the whole sourcing realm, China sourcing. So that's like the third chapter of my life. I was able to leverage my language skills, but at that time I was totally new to me. So I literally learned it from my old boss. He was like a very savvy, old China hand, spent like probably 30 years in China. He's really taught me a lot of the tricks of the trade, stuff that nobody really teaches you back then. I mean, you can see a lot of stuff online with Alibaba, but back then it was still like in the early days. So literally I visited like hundreds of Chinese factories. I was like the point person for my foreign suppliers. I sourced, the whole gamut, auto parts, sold water heaters, exercise bikes, spinning bikes, you name it, right? Noticed a lot of things, learned a lot. So that was the third chapter. And then fourth chapter was, it was about 2016. I had just recently gotten married, and then I started listening to podcasts, and they were talking about Amazon FBA. Right, I'm like, hey, this sounds a lot like the eBay stuff I was doing before. I had stopped the business when I moved to China because we didn't have, remote fulfillment options back then. And then I was listening to Scott Volker, the amazing seller. And I'm like, hey, I'm on the ground in China. I know how to source, and I did ecom before. So I put two and two together. So I partnered up with a business partner at that time. And then I started getting selling on Amazon FBA. It was about 2016. The first product that we did was Amazon watch bands. So at that time we timed it right when Apple Watch. I'm sorry, not Amazon Watch, but Apple Watch bands. Apple Watch. So we timed it back then to launch with Apple Watch. So there weren't really prevalent tools like we have now. So we really, hypothesized that, hey, iPhone has this whole ecosystem, right? All the iPhone cases, the accessories, it's like probably $1 billion business. Probably if Apple Watch catches on, there's going to be something similar, right? So we designed these like nylon watch bands, kind of like, James Bond, and there's like watch enthusiasts. So we designed these whole line of nylon bands. And long story short, we were able to grow it to a six-figure business in year one, which we were very excited about. So that's kind of the whole how I got started with Amazon. Um, the fifth chapter, I'm sorry if this is too long. The fifth chapter was, I started multiple brands. And I would always go to conferences because I really love learning from other sellers, what they're doing right, what's working, what's not working. And my wife and I got pregnant in 2018 with our son. And I was grounded. Obviously, she was like 7 to 8 months expecting. I couldn't fly out to Hong Kong like before. So I thought, I don't want to be left behind. So why not invite these seven-figure sellers to teach me online and to teach everyone else online what they're doing to build scale and grow their businesses. So that's the genesis behind Seven Figure Seller Summit. So the first summit was in August of 2018, and it's really designed to help Amazon sellers, e-commerce sellers learn from other real sellers and e-com experts how to build scale and exit their businesses. So yeah, that's kind of my long-winded intro.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and I really like, Gary, how you kind of summed it up in like chapters or phases. I think I really relate to that in terms of like, and you can also see like your progression of kind of for how you've learned and like built on those chapters as you went along. So yeah, excited to have you on the show today. You've got a wealth of experience, 15, 20 years in e-commerce and a lot of different areas. So I just want to dive right into it. You mentioned the Seven Figure Seller Summit. David and I had the opportunity recently to present on that, and was really cool. Can you share with the audience kind of what the Seven Figure Seller Summit, what does it cover, and like who is it for? Who should attend? Who's going to benefit the most?
Definitely. So we're launching the sixth edition of Seven Figure Seller Summit this February 28th until March 4th. And it's really designed to help Amazon e-commerce sellers. Maybe they're already doing about six figures, really bump it up to seven figures. So I've invited over 25 seven-figure Amazon sellers like yourselves, David and Ken, as well as other e-commerce experts to really show how they're doing it. This year's theme is the Wild West of e-commerce, because as we're seeing, on one hand, we still have the tremendous growth after opportunity. We're still kind of exiting the pandemic. Nobody knows for sure, but one thing is for sure, e-com is here to stay. We're seeing explosive growth. Also, in terms of selling an Amazon business, it's hotter now than it's ever before. It's probably like the property market. It's like a red hot market. We're seeing multiples like 5x to 7x from aggregators like Thrasio. But on the other hand, there's a lot of uncertainty, right? Things are changing very quickly. You have the whole supply chain uncertainty, as everyone knows, with high shipping costs, the delays. PPC costs are going up, the increased competition. And Amazon TOS changes, it's very unpredictable. So the goal is to really help sellers navigate through the Wild West and really survive and thrive. So that's kind of the theme. And it's a 5-day online event. So we've always been online ever since before the pandemic. So I guess we're very fortunate to be in that position because we already have been doing this for a number of years. And we were voted favorite Amazon conference in Seller Poll for 2 years in a row. We're really thankful for our community. Every event we have about over 3,500 people that register for a free pass from all over the world. And it's a 5-day event. So I really structured it kind of like the natural progression and growth of an e-commerce business to 7 figures. So day one is all about the mindset, the fundamentals of a 7-figure seller. Day two is all about marketing, PPC, and branding your business. Day three is about scaling your business to 7 figures from real sellers start doing it. Day four is about profitability, keeping more money in your pocket. And then day five is about exits. So structuring your business to sell it and maximizing that exit. So that's kind of the picture of the summit.
Very nice. We were honored to speak at the Seven Figure Seller Summit this year, and also are very excited to be in attendance. In particular, that profitability day. I will be tuning into every session because, as Ken will tell you, I'm a bit obsessed. So, anyway, switching gears, let's talk about the current state of affairs in regards to sourcing out of China. What are your thoughts here? There have been a lot of topics that have come up on this year. Obviously lead times with COVID, container shortage. So, what are your thoughts now, and what's your 3 to 5 year outlook?
I don't know if I have a crystal ball, David, but as we've seen in the past few years, ever since the pandemic, the shipping container costs are just an all-time high. It's very volatile. Prior to the pandemic, as everyone kind of remembers the good old days, your container would cost $2,000-$3,000 to ship from, let's say, Port of Shanghai to Long Beach, and now it's up and down. It was past $20,000, and as David and Ken are very familiar. It does make sense to explore different options, right? But at the same time, China is still the world leader in manufacturing. I don't think any one place can replace China, just with the depth and the breadth of the products that can be manufactured there. But the other factor is the delays, right? The delays in getting a container and logistics, shipping. China has a zero tolerance policy when it comes to COVID. So even if there's just one case, they literally could shut down the whole port. And it's like a top 5 port in the world, like Ningbo. I just spoke with one of my contacts on the ground in Shenzhen. There were like 6 truckers that crossed the border from Hong Kong to Shenzhen, and one of the truckers literally met someone in his apartment complex, and these guys were later tested positive for COVID. They literally locked down the whole apartment complex just because there was some contact. So it's really hard to say, but I do feel that for many sellers, you really have to run the numbers when it comes to especially the whole shipping and supply chain. Going forward, hopefully we can find a way out of this, and I do see that China will still be a important player for sourcing, obviously, but it does make sense to have backup plans. So in the whole supply chain world, this is not new, right? It's nobody wants to put all their eggs into one basket. So even 5-10 years ago, a lot of big companies had a China plus one strategy, right? So you may be sourcing some products from China, but you may be sourcing others from a Vietnam, from an India, or even from a Mexico, if it makes sense, right? So it does make sense to have some contingency plans, but I don't see China totally going away in terms of sourcing. Long story short, because of just the whole depth and the breadth, but it does make sense for certain products and certain sellers to look at other options.
Sure. And well, I forgot to ask you, Gary, are you, you mentioned you'd studied language. Are you fluent in Mandarin?
Yes. So
okay.
I'm kind of like an outlier, because even though I was born and raised in the States, my family is from mainland China. We spoke exclusively 100% Mandarin Chinese at home. So I was kind of blessed to be in that position to have some fundamentals, but I really I studied abroad in college for 2 semesters in China, and I did a graduate studies program for another year in China as well. So yes, I am fluent in Chinese. It is tremendous advantage that I have, that I'm very fortunate to have.
Yeah, that was my next thing, was that, that is a huge advantage in terms of, kind of sourcing and navigating, um, sourcing
Yeah.
out of China, which is
It's
which is
actually
huge.
a double-edged sword, if I could quickly share, because most people think that's great to have, but because I'm ethnically Chinese, if I go to a trade show and I speak to them in Chinese, some of these booth owners, they think I'm a competitor, like spying on them, because like, who's this guy? I mean, this might be our competition. Are you like a trading agent? Like some people don't even want to talk to me for that reason. So it's just funny how, it is a double-edged sword. It's not just like, oh, good, but it is, I think on the whole, it is beneficial.
Yeah. On the other side of that coin is, you could go to the trade show and speak in English, and then whenever the shop owners are kind of communicating in Mandarin about trying to up the price or lower the price, you can
Yes.
pick up on that. So
Yes.
it
Yes.
could be helpful on
Yes.
that.
Yes.
No, that's awesome. And so you kind of mentioned, just to follow up on the sourcing piece. You had mentioned China plus one. Where are you seeing a lot of the big players? Where we've looked at a few other countries to source from, and a lot of countries, they don't have, kind of the Belt and Road, right? Like they don't have, they're not used to exporting. And so where do you
Yes.
see the main countries that the big players are exporting out of and making it happen?
Vietnam is one of the big ones. A lot of the apparel brands are moving there. If you look at your footwear, your Nikes, your Under Armours, they're moving out there. But the thing is, for Vietnam, those factories are used to like big orders from like these big brands. They're not as used to like smaller Amazon FBA sellers. So it's a little bit more difficult in that respect. India is another opportunity, especially for more like handmade type products. They're very strong in like raw material, like wooden products, like some certain metal products, but less so with like machine, refined like automation products. um, you know, and besides that, there are some opportunities with Mexico. Obviously, Mexico has the free trade agreement with the U.S. if you're selling in the U.S. So immediately, not only are you eliminating all the tariffs from China, but you're also eliminating the duties as well, right? So even if the product cost could be higher, like the net landed cost, that could be another. It could be lower. So you really have to know your numbers, but yeah, you're right, Ken, about the whole logistics, because China does have the experience, because they got started a lot earlier than a lot of these other countries. So they just it's more like a well-oiled machine. I mean, it's not flawless, but they're more experienced. Anytime you're talking about FOB and exports and all going through all the whole customs, then like let's say an Indian supplier that might be doing this for the first time, or even like a Mexican supplier that isn't as familiar with the FBA requirements and all that.
All right, Gary, we're kind of pivoting into, you had mentioned you have interviewed 150 seven-figure sellers and e-commerce experts. So I'd like to dive into that and really, study that and figure out, have you noticed any common traits, and what are they doing that other people are not? Why are they so successful?
Yeah, I think one of the things I really am fortunate um, with being in my position is the fact that I can interview and kind of like analyze how these seven-figure sellers built up their business, both their successes and also some of their failures, quote unquote failures and mistakes, and how they were able to overcome them. So one of the key things that I'm seeing right now in 2022, and this thing kind of surprised me, and I'd like to hear what you guys think about this as well. Um, you know, Traditionally you hear that saying, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket. You need to diversify. You need to spread out your risk. But one thing that surprised me right now in 2022 is, for successful sellers, they're really focusing. They're focusing on just like one or two things that they can do the best, right? Maybe it's their superpower, they can be world class at this, and then they outsource the rest, right? So they're not like chasing after all these shiny new objects, right? So because I feel in 2022 it's the wild west in e-commerce, and all the costs are up, so you really got to focus on one to two things that you can execute and do much better than your competition. And one example is a seven-figure seller that I spoke with recently, John Elder, and he recently exited his business for mid seven figures. And in his session, from a 7 to 5 job to a seven-figure exit, he shared that it took him 5 years to build up this business and to exit. And his main focus, I mean, not only that, he had a full-time job the first 3 years, and his family had a newborn the first 3 years. So you can imagine what he was going through. And my son just turned 3, and it's been a struggle for me to manage. Obviously, I want to put family first, but also the business side, right? So going back to focusing on two things, his main mission was to research the right products to add to his product line and launch them successfully, right? So that was his number one thing. He did it the right way. He didn't do any black hat tactics, and also he wasn't distracted by shiny new objects. But not only that, the day-to-day Amazon stuff, one thing that I found very interesting is once he hit a certain level, he outsourced all of the things away from the focus one to two things. So he outsourced his PPC, he outsourced his booking, he outsourced his accounting, right? He wasn't distracted on that. He hired an employee to help with some of the administrative tasks, right? So he wasn't, this way he could lock in, focus on growing his business. And he built multiple brands. It took him 5 years. And the first 3 years he was working full-time in construction. So it wasn't just 9 to 5, it was 7 to 5, because he had to go on site early. And he also said that he sacrificed a lot, right? He sacrificed his lunch breaks. All his lunch breaks, he was in front of the computer checking Amazon messages. Even evenings, he cut Netflix. He had to cut aside time with his wife. Like he said, hey honey, I gotta spend 1 hour getting to talking to the Chinese suppliers, right? He cut the gym. So it takes sacrifice, guys. He really locked in, he focused, but the reward was he was able to exit his business in mid seven figures. He took 1 whole year off, no business, spent it with family, traveled. So I think that focus, that's one of the key things that I'm seeing right now for many sellers.
I really like that, and it's something that I think, as I think about how Ken and I are running our business, is an area that we can improve on. In fact, like right now, we're hiring a lot, which just that takes a lot of time, and so there's time investment on the outsourcing, but I really do think the juice is worth the squeeze, and you hear that a lot of people that identify their superpower, and that's what they do, and so I really like that answer. Yeah. What about you've likely interviewed people that are doing drop shipping, people that are doing wholesale, people that are doing private label. Does there seem to be a particular area within e-commerce that stands out from the others?
Yeah, that's a good question, David. So with the different business models, drop shipping, wholesaling, and private label, I feel that drop shipping may have been a stronger opportunity, let's say 5 years ago, and nowadays, I mean, the opportunity still exists, but it's just very competitive. Wholesale, there definitely are opportunities, but if in terms of the end game, a lot of sellers really want to sell their business, I feel that a private label brand would have the best exit opportunity compared to a drop shipper and a wholesaler. What day 5 of the summit is all about exits and how these sellers exited their business, right? So I feel like private label, to me, in my opinion, is the most lucrative opportunity, because if you look at a seller's salary or take home over the life of running a business, normally most of that will come on the exit, right? It would be much more than your salary that you pay yourself. I don't know how much you guys pay yourselves. I could be wrong, but most of that would come from the exit and the end game, because we are seeing multiples, very high right now. 5 to 7x multiples from Thrasio, and even when I first started interviewing sellers in 2018 and in 2020, at that time a 2x or 3x multiple was considered good. Right. And in 2018, if you thought about selling your Amazon business, people thought you were crazy. I mean, who would buy an Amazon business, right? That's not like a real business. And now it's totally different. And this may change, but as of what we're seeing right now, Amazon business are very hot in terms of exit opportunities.
One follow up there, and then I'll kick it over to David. I think it's great. Like I think you had mentioned, or I saw a stat somewhere that Kevin Flaherty from Thrasio, who we've had on the show before, was saying current multiples are like 5x to 7x. I think that's insane compared to just a year, 12 months or 24 months ago. And David, he was in a former life, he was in an M&A environment a lot, and he was always shocked at how the brick and mortar multiples for brick and mortar businesses were so high compared to e-commerce. And I wonder if there's not a level set now of them even going higher, just because of
I'm curious, bricks and mortar, what sort of multiples are you seeing?
So I've been waiting for my time to chime in on multiples. So and I'll get to that answer, but I think multiples are getting to where they should be or should have always been. In my 8 years at this consulting firm, I probably saw about 50 deals, and I would say the average multiple on that was between 5 and 7x. And these were, our clients were primarily private equity funds that were some manufacturing, but really all kinds of businesses. And so why do I think multiples should be higher than where they were a couple years ago? Well, if I'm an investor, I'm concerned about cash flow and ROI. That's it. If you boil it down, that's what I'm concerned about. And, are there differences between an e-commerce company and, a brick and mortar entity? Certainly. But $100,000 of cash flow is $100,000 of cash flow. And, and we've seen this on the business line of credit side of things, where we'll approach a bank and they will say, this is an unusual business. It's hard for us to wrap our minds around. We're looking at your balance sheet, and the only thing that you have is inventory in your laptop. And I would argue that means that we're incredibly lean. You know what I mean? And, most of our input is into inventory costs. And so it is a very lean way to operate a company. And so I'm happy to see multiples where they're at. And when I heard of people selling at 1.5 or 2 times earnings, I just, using that cash flow and ROI example, it just didn't make a lot of sense to me. And so anyway, I would like to see them stay where they're at. And I do think that there's still, from a buyer standpoint, there's still value of buying a 7x company.
Yeah. Just to follow into that, I think with e-commerce penetration is still very low compared to retail. I think there's space to grow with that proper business model. Growing a brand that with an audience, I think is crucial. And so just to kind of sum up, Gary, the top things that you've kind of culled out of interviewing 157 figure sellers. So the 4 things to kind of sum it up is, like, we covered the business model, kind of that private label brand building is a good solid business model. Sacrifice, you have to sacrifice, whether you're a full-time employee or, you have to find time and sacrifice time. You have to focus on just a couple of things. Just laser focus on 1 or 2 things that you're good at. And it's the long game, that 5-year approach. Like, nothing's going to happen overnight. Nothing's going to happen in 12 months. Give yourself that roadmap of like 5 years to accomplish what you want. Is that a pretty good sum?
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary. In terms of the timeline, different businesses may move at different speeds. I wouldn't expect someone to be able to exit their business in 6 months. I would say at least a couple years. We have seen that happen, but yeah, I think that's key. And something else that you guys mentioned that resonated with me as well in terms of hiring. And this is actually one of the key takeaways. And recently, when I polled a group of about 37-figure sellers, I asked them what was their top mistake, and a number of them admitted that they hired too late, right? So, for example, Egla Radik, a 7-figure seller based in Estonia, said that not outsourcing quicker, trying to be a superwoman, which results in working in your business rather than on it. Trying to do too much myself, that's still a problem. But she said that was one of the top mistakes she made on the way to 7 figures, not hiring soon enough. But she realized that this was a bottleneck, so she started to list anything that was repetitive within her business, anything she did like 3-4 times a month, and it became a list of tasks for future employees. She created standard operating procedures and taught them to her hires. So she shared that we as entrepreneurs are creators, and our role is to always bring more money in. So we're hired to bring new money, so we need to buy more time. That's why we need to hire people to help us. So I think that that's something that is one of the common traits of successful 7-figure sellers.
I like that. I really like that. And yeah, it's just a good reminder for everyone listening who gets stuck in that. And I know I've experienced this where you kind of think of your business as like a baby, right? And when you hire someone, they're taking care of your baby. And so it seems like there's a little bit of a hurdle that at least I needed to get over mentally to bring someone in and help take care of my baby. And of course, standard operating procedures and good reporting makes that easier. But anyway, let's switch gears. Gary, with the amount of experience you have in sourcing and then e-commerce, especially in those early eBay days, you have seen e-commerce grow as an industry, and likely it was an infant when you got into it, and it is maturing. So curious in your 3 to 5 year outlook on e-commerce in general, what do you believe the smart sellers will be focusing on, and just the overall industry as a whole?
Yeah, I still feel we're early in this game. I think maybe we're still in the first or the second inning. I don't think it's matured at all, because there's still so much opportunity. My outlook, I think it's fascinating. We're seeing kind of like offline, like marrying with online. I interviewed a PPC expert, Ritu Java, and she gave a behind the scenes look at Amazon advertising's DSP, and then it's fascinating because now you're able to actually look at the data from Whole Foods Market offline, the supermarket, right? So you can actually target Whole Foods shoppers. Like, let's say one of my niches is in kitchen, it's a coffee related product. I can actually target offline Whole Foods Market shoppers because Amazon owns Whole Foods. They have all that data. Like someone that's bought Folgers coffee, hey, I can retarget them with my ads, right? Before, just like a few years ago, that's impossible, right? So I think there's still so much more opportunity that we can tap into. So I think there will be more of like a hybrid model, offline to online. We're seeing obviously there's curbside pickup and all that stuff. I still see a lot of growth. Will Amazon continue to dominate? eBay, if we looked at history, eBay was the number one player back in the 2000s, right? eBay was just in Amazon's position. There were eBay Live, conferences that I would go to in Vegas, just there's all these Amazon conferences. So I don't really know. I mean, I don't see one player taking out Amazon right away unless something happens. Maybe the government splits up Amazon. Walmart's up and coming, but they don't have the same online experience, and they have the offline infrastructure. So maybe we're seeing tremendous growth from Walmart, so that could be another opportunity. But yeah, again, I don't have a crystal ball, but I still think, we're still early in the game, and a lot of sellers have a lot of opportunities, and we're seeing sellers exit maybe their first brand, and they can get back in the game in the second brand, right? I mean, it's not end game, after you exit. So yeah, I still see a lot of opportunities.
Definitely agree, and it's exciting. It's an exciting space to be in. It's always changing and growing. So really cool. So before we head into the fire round, is there anything else that you want to cover, Gary or David?
Gary, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on profitability. Obviously, as our listeners know, I can't make it through an entire podcast without talking about it. And so, curious what you're seeing on that end.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you nailed it. The costs are really high right now, with the shipping costs, with the PPC cost, the raw material cost, and I feel there really isn't a silver bullet, but one of the key things to focus on this year is to focus on profitability, especially with your supply chain, right? A lot of sellers have not renegotiated with their suppliers recently. I know some sellers may not have talked about this in years with their suppliers. So, pricing is one thing. If you're able to, have economies of scale, going to larger orders, you may be able to get some price discounts. But on the other hand, anticipate price increases as well. At the time of our conversation, we were just past Chinese New Year 2022, and traditionally, for Chinese companies, it's their start of the new financial year, and then that's when they adjust pricing. So you may want to anticipate some price adjustments and be prepared to negotiate that. Other than that, one thing related to profitability is um, your packaging sizes, right? Because if you're able to optimize your packaging, fit more products into a container, you can save money on your bottom line, right? One of the seven-figure sellers we spoke to, Jamie Parros, he's based in Australia. He's really optimizing his carton packaging so he can maximize the number of units he can put in a container. So if, previously you can only ship 800 units per container, but you can optimize your packaging, maybe you can get 1,000 units. So all of those savings will be passed on to your profitability, to your bottom line. I also love what you guys shared, Ken and David. Look at ways to cut your cost of goods sold. With your complete roadmap, how you self-manufacture in the U.S. Previously you sourced from China, but you found a way to move sourcing to the U.S. And even though the labor cost was higher, you're able to cut your product landed costs, right? I mean, with all the things like the looking at all the details, right? And also you saved a lot on your delivery lead times. We're talking like 4 days instead of 4 months, right? So I feel that the focus today, I mean, we got to focus on profitability to offset all of these increased shipping costs and all of these other factors to be successful.
Very nice. Very nice. I've got one more question on the profitability front that then we can get into the fire round. You see in Facebook groups a lot, people will say, oh, my profit margin is 50% or 40, high 40s or 50s, sometimes even 60 or 70%. And when I read that, I think to myself, well, they're either lying or they're not considering all their costs, or I am bad at operating my own Amazon business because I tend to end up around, that 15% mark. If you were to give a rounded average, so I'm saying net income divided by revenue for profit margin after everyone gets paid, what do you see? What would you place that number as?
Yes, that's a really good question. And in fact, I asked this question to the seller accountant, Tyler Jeffcoat, and he works with many successful e-commerce entrepreneurs. And then his recommendation, the key metric to focus on, is the post-advertising gross margin. Post-advertising gross margin. So what does that mean? So that is your gross margin, and then you would subtract all of your Amazon advertising PPC expenses, as well as your non-Amazon advertising, such as Facebook ads, Google ads. So according to him, in terms of the post-advertising gross margin, the best products are getting 35%. Okay, 35% is really good. Good products are getting close to 25% post-advertising gross margin. If you're at 20% with this product, it's a yellow flag. You may want to call an audible. You probably want to rehab to look at ways you can improve upon that. And if it's 15% or below post-advertising gross, you gotta fire that product. If it's non-performing, it's not, it could be, outside the 80-20 of what you should be focusing on. So I think that was a really good metric that Tyler shared.
I really like that. I really like that. And I I will be applying that to our financial statements. I think that's a good lens to look at things through. So well, very nice. Well, Ken, let's get the fire round started.
Yeah. Yep. Gary, are you ready for the fire round?
Let's do it.
All right. What is your favorite book?
I think that one of the first entrepreneur books I read was The E-Myth Revisited, Michael Gerber. Just getting around that mental block of, if I were to teach someone else to do it, I should do it myself. If I never outsourced anything, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Excellent book. And what are your hobbies?
I like to cook when I have time. I make dinner every night for my family, and lately I'm starting to garden. It's a nice activity to de-stress, and I have some. We can get some time away from the screens with my son as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you were sharing with us before the show that it's you're able to grow like most of the year where you live. So super jealous.
Yeah, we're super fortunate.
Yeah, that's awesome. What is the one thing that you do not miss about working for the man?
Just that morning commute, just squeezing the traffic and all that. I used to live in LA, and it's just, that time just stuck in traffic. I don't miss that.
LA traffic. That's a good answer.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah. All right, last one. What do you think sets apart successful e-commerce entrepreneurs from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
I think the thing that sets apart successful entrepreneurs is when they face challenges, they find a way to get things done. I feel like there's always a way to get things done. It's just up to you to find it. I feel like there's always like a door, an opportunity. And sometimes, we don't, if we can't go through the wall, we go around it, we go over it, we go under it. I mean, I think there's always a way. And it's not easy. It's not easy. And, we get frustrated, but I think everyone has a gift. Everyone has to discover that and, be able to apply it to, to help others and to build that business. And I think that's the number one thing.
Excellent answer. David, you want to close out the show?
Yeah, absolutely. Gary, if people want to learn more about the 7-Figure Seller Summit, where can they go?
Absolutely. So, everything I shared today was just my personal takeaways. I'm sure, Ken, David, if you were to watch the summit, you could take away, things that are totally different because everyone's business, everyone's personality is unique. So I'd love to offer a free pass to everyone to the 7-Figure Seller Summit. We're launching February 28th through March 4th. And it's an online event and it's a 5-day event. I highly recommend you guys check it out. And Ken and David, I believe that we have a custom link for you guys as well. So do you want to share that, or should I? Yeah.
We will post a link to that in the show notes.
Yes, perfect. So
awesome.
Excellent. Excellent.
Gary, thank you so much for being a guest on the Firing the Man podcast, and looking forward to staying in touch.
You're very welcome, Ken and David. It's been a pleasure, and good luck to you guys and everyone out there. Have a great 2022, and hopefully to see you guys at the 7-Figure Seller Summit.
All right. Sounds great.